You are listening to Fantasy Filmball with Matt and Dylan, and on this show, we turn movies into sports and look at all the Oscar prospects and their fantasy value.
I believe that this is going to win Best Picture, and here's why.
I mean, Denis Villeneuve got all the nominations he needed for Dune and still missed out on the Best Director slot.
Don't let me get my hopes up. The Academy has disappointed me too many times.
Thank you to the Academy. Thank you to all of you in this room.
I can't remember the last time I walked out of a movie theater on such a high.
No matter how certain it seems, anything can happen on nominations morning.
Never count the Golden Globes for just doing something off the walls and bonkers.
It's the kind of movie that reminds me of why I fell in love with movies.
And the Oscar goes to...
Welcome into episode 22 of Fantasy Filmball. My name is Dyl.
And my name is Matt, and this is the show where we turn movies into sports and sports into something that we don't talk about here. And today we've got a very special, very big episode. Might be a little bit longer than usual. If it is, we do apologize right off the bat. But Dylan, you just returned from the Virginia Film Festival, and you saw a lot of movies. How many movies did you see?
I ended up seeing 13. I had a last-minute switch to allow myself to see an extra movie, which I think worked out a lot for the better. But yeah, 13 movies in 5 days. One day, I think 2 days, I actually had 4. The other ones were 2 or 1. And yeah, just a fun experience up and down.
Well, we're going to be talking all about that today and hearing all your thoughts on all these films because there's a lot of big Oscar contenders from the year, some of which I've seen, some of which I have yet to see, and I'm very excited to hear about. But as always, I mean, we're just going to kind of rush through because there's a lot to talk about this week. So as always, we've got a question that we always start our episode off with. And as always, I encourage you guys in the comments to respond. Let us know what you think about this question and your answer. But the question that we have this week is if you could distill your movie taste down to just one thing. Like, just obviously we like tons of different movies, but if you had to just define yourself by one specific niche, what would it be?
So for me, I would do bombastic and stylistic, which to me, that word is very broad. It can mean two things. You could have the left end of it from Batman and Seven all the way to the right side of Cats and Elvis. When you say those movies, that's two very different types of movies, but they're both... All 4 of those movies are so bombastic, they're so stylistic, they know exactly what they are, and they're embracing it. They're not shying away from whether it's a detective noir thriller or in-your-face mess, but it's a beautiful mess.
I like that. I like the bombastic word. That's just a good word in general. And yeah, I mean, for me, those style over substance movies... Gotta love them. Gotta love them. You gotta appreciate sometimes when people just go all in on making something absolutely batshit insane. I appreciate it. And for me, I guess, okay, I'm actually gonna cheat on my own question here. And I'm gonna give 2 answers because I feel like I have 2 very distinct niches that they don't really go hand in hand. But the first one would be sci-fi and fantasy movies with a bit of a twist. Like usually very thoughtful fantasy or sci-fi movies, things that have a bit of magic in them, but they also kind of focus on reality and the darkness of the world. And I mention that because I saw Pinocchio this week, the Del Toro one, not the Zemeckis one, and it felt so perfectly made for me because it's a film that's so full of magic and so full of love and so full of life, and yet it also has this darkness under it all. And that just feels like that's the type of movie that I love so much. Pan's Labyrinth is a movie that like got me into loving film, and this felt like the same thing. And so many of my favorite movies are that sci-fi or fantasy movie with a bit of darkness, a bit of sadness underneath. And the other niche that I have would definitely be quirky indie comedies or indie dramas that have a soundtrack of indie music from the 2000s, usually like a singer-songwriter or an acoustic guitar. So many of my... I don't know why, but like the movie Juno, when I first saw that as like a 9-year-old, which is probably way too young to watch Juno, when I first saw that movie, it just spurred something in me. And so many of my favorite movies now just go back to like, wow, these are just quirky people saying quirky lines and Elliott Smith is playing. And that's just like, I don't know, that's defined my music taste and my taste in movies for like the last 15 years, basically.
I mean, you got some great variants there as well. I mean, we have
It's like opposite
Guillermo del
sides of the
Toro
spectrum,
movies
man.
to like Me and Earl and the Dying Girl and other type of small indie drama
Oh,
comedies.
dude. Don't even get me started on Me and Earl and the Dying Girl. I love the shit out of that movie, and that's what I'm talking about when I mean that's my niche. But it's like two very different niches that I feel like equally represent who I am. And I someday, like, as a filmmaker, want to just mash those two things together and make, like, a very sad indie drama with, like, I don't know, God, who's like I'd love to play like just a bunch of Big Thief music, or like Sufjan Stevens, like a Sufjan Stevens soundtrack, but then it's also a sci-fi movie. That feels like the most me thing imaginable.
It does. Hopefully some director out there is listening to this and like, you know what? That's my next project. He's going to get on it.
No, it's not their project. It's mine.
Ooh.
Hopefully someone out there is listening and goes, we'll hire you to make the sad indie sci-fi movie of your dreams. And I'll go, thank you, Mr. Executive. I will take your $1 million to make my very vague project that I really haven't described at all. But anyways, thank you for listening to us rant. And yes, please comment below. What is your specific film niche? What is your specific taste? We want to hear about it. We want to talk to you about the weird film shit you like. But anyways, we're going to get into our Film Ball update of the week. And not much has happened since last week. There's been a few things. Dylan, your pick from this past month, your waiver draft pick, Goodnight Oppie, just won big at the Critics' Choice Documentary Awards, which is like, it's a big deal. So it won both Best Documentary and Best Documentary Director, and like a bunch of other awards, but those aren't ones that we count for points in the game. So overall, it took 20 points from the Critics' Choice Awards, which is a good haul. And if you remember from a few weeks ago, we were talking about the Critics' Choice Documentary Awards and about how year after year, the two types of movies that win at the Critics' Choice Awards for documentary are either films that don't get nominated at the Oscars or that win the Oscars. So, Dylan, what do you think Goodnight Oppie is? Is it winning the Oscar, or is it not getting nominated?
See, I don't really know. I would love for it to be the one that gets nominated, but I could also see this just being that type of documentary that seems like, yeah, it's cool. I haven't seen it myself personally, so I can't speak to the doc itself. But from the outside, at least, it seems like, yeah, it's cool, but it's not doing all that too much. It's just like a fun documentary. It's not pushing the boundaries in a narrative way. But I know this movie does have a lot of visual effects working in it that is sort of pushing the boundaries, which could help its case come Oscar season.
Well, it's My Octopus Teacher, and I think it should be out on Amazon like maybe next week, maybe the week after. So we'll talk about it a little bit when you get to see it. But I've actually kind of rejigged my my documentary predictions around, and I do actually have Goodnight Oppie winning right now.
Nice.
Because my case for Descendant a few weeks ago when we talked about documentaries, the case I made was that usually a political documentary will win in a year where there's some heavy shit going on, and specifically if the Democrats really, really lost badly and there was a red wave at the election in the United States, then we would definitely see something like Descendant win. Something very political, something very pointed. But that didn't happen. This is not a political podcast, but we will, like, obviously it impacts the race. So with the Democrats really overperforming, I don't think we're going to see like a political documentary win at the Oscars this year. So that opens up for something like Goodnight Oppie. And yeah, I'm very interested to see if that wins, or All the Beauty and the Bloodshed might be climbing back up after missing the Critics' Choice, or even I watched Navalny this week. Mm-hmm. Dill, have you seen Navalny yet?
I haven't, but I've been a lot higher on its Oscar chances than you have been throughout the whole season.
Oh, I'm high on its Oscar chances after seeing it. It has like the single most insane scene in a documentary that I think I might have ever seen. I'm not going to spoil anything, but there's a moment in it that I feel like every documentary filmmaker dreams of capturing a moment like this on film. It's like the perfect spy movie moment, but it's real life. Mm-hmm. And you're going to have to watch the movie. But when I saw that moment, it kind of convinced me, like, no, Navalny didn't peak early. It hasn't peaked yet. It's going to kind of swoop in. And I do think it's coming for a nomination, and I think it has a strong case for a win. Because the film, it's the perfect middle finger to Vladimir Putin. It's like a big fuck you to that guy. And so I would love to hear what you think about this film. And that film did pick up some other points this week at the International Documentary Association Awards. So those are some things that have kind of developed in the documentary race. And otherwise, we've got the British Independent Film Award nominations, where good luck to you, Leo Grand, Living, After Sun, and the still unpicked film in our league, The Wonder, picked up a ton of nominations and got like a solid chunk of 25 points each. And also this week we added in some Metacritic points for Black Panther, 67 points, Pinocchio, 89 points, The Fabelmans, 86 points, and The Sun, 60 points. So really not much has shifted in our Filmball League this week, but we've got a lot of stuff on the horizon. The Indie Spirit Awards are coming up literally like next week, right?
Something like that, yeah, very soon.
Yeah, I think it's November 22nd. So that's plenty of stuff for us to talk about very soon. Yeah. And Dylan, why don't you start us off with some news today? What do we got going on in the news?
So it's kind of funny enough that we just talked about the rankings for the Filmball League, because first place right now is The Film Drunk, and every film on his team has a critic score except for one, which is the movie that we just got a trailer for, being Empire of Light. And we talked about what our ideal take of cinema is, and that movie has a take of cinema, and that trailer is the most dull thing I've ever seen. I saw the trailer before I saw a movie that I actually just came back from, Banshees of Inisherin, which we'll talk about later in the show. But I don't really know what to make.
We're going to talk about it, man.
I don't really know what to make of the trailer for Empire of Light, because the movie just seems so dull and so boring, which I know that's what people have said it is, but I like Sam Mendes, so I don't want it to be, but it probably is.
Well, okay, for context, Dylan, you were supposed to see Empire of Light at the Virginia Film Festival, and then I convinced you to skip out on it to go see a different movie, because I was like, this is a much better use of your time to go see Close than Empire of Light. And I think having seen the new trailer, you probably feel the same way, where you're like, oh, wow, yeah, I'm glad that I skipped out on that one. You'll be able to see it in theaters. It will underwhelm you. It will disappoint you. We don't need to talk about it much more than that. Although I will be honest, I have a bit more faith in Olivia Colman. Weirdly, at this point, I feel like Viola Davis is dropping a little bit because The Woman King has kind of dropped a bit, which leaves an opening for Olivia Colman to not be top five, but to be a little bit closer to the top five. But yeah, in terms of trailers that underwhelmed, I have heard a lot of people saying that this trailer underwhelmed them, and I want to hear from you. I've seen the movie, but you have not, and we've been waiting for a trailer for The Whale for a long time. What was your take on this little 1-minute clip of the movie? Did it fulfill what you wanted out of this trailer? Did it disappoint you like I know it disappointed many people?
Well, for listeners of the show, if they know, I have not been high on the Whale's Oscar chances at all this season. I think this is a movie that is going to be controversial and not in a good way. And I think A24 knows that. I think that's one of the reasons why it took so long for us to get this trailer under a month before its wide release, and why the trailer doesn't really show anything. You don't really get much out of it. You get, like what Matt was saying, 1 minute of mainly talking with various different word screens up and an occasional clip of Brendan Fraser. And I think A24 knows they have a firestorm of negativity coming, regardless of the movie itself, just the conversations the movie's going to spark, and they're trying to contain it. And I think they did a good job of it. You don't see him, which is a good thing for some people out there and for the discourse around this movie. But I'm really excited to see just what all the buzz about the movie is, because I know that you said your thing and other people have said their thing, but the main consensus I'm getting from this movie is Brendan Fraser's great, but people love it because it's Brendan Fraser and not the movie itself. But then I've seen some people say The Whale's top 5 for picture. Brendan Fraser's a lock for actor win. Hong Chow could win supporting. It's number 2 in adapted screenplay. I'm like, no one's saying this when they walk out of the movie. They're just saying, I like Brendan Fraser. Yay, let's stand and clap for 10 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, not to shit on anyone's predictions, but I will say that one of my favorite Oscar predictors on YouTube recently released their November predictions, where they said that The Whale is just a lock for picture and is in the top 8 and a lock. And I just don't see how. And, you know, no knock to them, but I can't get on board with The Whale being top 8 at this point. it just feels like A24 doesn't know what to do with it. They don't know how to campaign it. They don't know how to market it. And I feel like we've only got like a lot of negativity coming for this film. I really love Brendan Fraser in this, but yeah, there's just so much riding against it, and it seems like A24 has entirely put all their priorities towards Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is a good thing. Because A24 cannot promote 2 movies at once. We have seen that in previous years, but it's really, yeah, I don't see a world where this makes Best Picture. I really don't. It's mystifying to me why so many pundits, specifically on Twitter, are really, really high about this film. But I want to talk about the real whale of the week in a movie trailer, because we both saw the whale in the Avatar: The Way of Water trailer. And what do you think about this new trailer for Avatar: The Way of Water? I know this is your most anticipated of the year. You have it winning Best Picture. Personally, I've seen this when I saw Black Panther in theaters. This trailer played beforehand, and the trailer, I was just smiling ear to ear the entire time. Like, Avatar is something that has impacted me as a film goer so much, and so seeing this trailer, I was like, yeah, this is happening. I love this. I'm so excited, and goddamn, do the crafts look so good. What's your take, though? You are the man who has Avatar: The Way of Water taking Best Picture this year. Is it living up to your expectations?
I feel good about it right now. Picture, like I've mentioned before, I'm not moving until I see it. But for text, I feel even better. The cinematography here shows I don't see a world where this doesn't win. I know that's a bold take, but there's a lot of years where VFX and cinematography go hand in hand. And after seeing Wakanda Forever, after seeing I think almost every VFX player, for the most part, no one's comparing to Avatar, and the cinematography in the trailer looks amazing. The score in the trailer sounds really good. With that comes another possible nomination with other movies dropping down, and then we get into the other text, like the production design, the editing. You build up this great package of below-the-line categories. A director could come along because someone has to do them. Yes, you can be like Dune missed out last year. No offense to Villeneuve, but he's no James Cameron in terms of name alone. And I feel like James Cameron's a lot safer of a name check than Denis Villeneuve is, even though I did love Dune and he was my personal Pez director pick of last year. And then all that together means a Best Picture nomination, and in a preferential ballot is where I think stuff this year will become really interesting, because there's a lot of movies, if you just look at like a not consensus, but a pretty consensus top 10 lineup, where I'm like, okay, maybe not many people have Avatar at 1, but I don't see many people who would put it at 10, where there's a lot of other movies like an Elvis that could get a 10, a Everything Everywhere that could get a 10, just people who are all like, this is way too stylistic for me, or even on the opposite end of like a Maverick out of 10, or a Banshees possibly, or Women Talking sort of thing, where they're just like, this one thing I really don't like about this movie, so I'm putting it at the bottom. Where with Avatar, I could see a lot of 4 or 5s, and I kind of feel like that's what Coda was last year. Yeah, you can make the case, a lot of people love Coda and had it at 1, but I've never personally met someone or seen someone on Twitter who's like, yeah, Coda would have been my number 1 last year. It was a bunch of people saying, Coda's my 3-4, but everyone had it at 3-4.
Right. Coda personally would have been, I think, for me, it would have been like second from the bottom last year.
Yeah, it would have been my 9 as well.
But that said, I'm not an Academy voter. So that does not come into play. Also, okay, I've actually started to flirt with the possibility of Avatar as a potential spoiler for a nomination in adapted screenplay, because this week James Cameron did some interviews talking about how he heard the criticisms of the first film, that people said that they didn't get attached to the characters, people said that they didn't care about anything that was going on in the film, and that it was just a spectacle. And so it seems like James Cameron took that to heart, and the reason why Avatar: The Way of Water is so long, because it's over 3 hours, the reason why it's so long is because he wanted to give more time to the characters and focus on the characters and tell a story. And I also just learned that the screenwriters of the new Planet of the Apes series, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, War of the Planet of the Apes, they co-wrote the new Avatar with James Cameron, which I didn't know until this week, and that gives me so much hope that this film is going to be so much more than just a spectacle. It's going to be heartfelt. And yes, I do think that this can play spoiler for one of those 2 undecided adapted screenplay slots. And speaking of some other chances that this film has, all year long I've had Avatar: The Way of Water on the outside of my song nominations because I didn't know if this one would have a song. Because this week we got some nominations for the Hollywood Music and Media Awards, we do know now that Avatar: The Way of Water has a song in the film. It's called The Song Chord. We haven't heard the song yet, but we know that there is a song in Avatar, and that potentially could make it into that top 5, which would be really interesting. And speaking of other songs that are going to be in the top 5, we heard Diane Warren's new song this week, Applause from Tell It Like a Woman. Oh, dear God. Can Diane Warren just, like, stop getting nominations for subpar songs? Because this is going to get nominated, and it's like... Did you listen to the song?
No, I have not listened to the song. I kind of don't seek out Diane Warren songs because I don't need to, because there's no reason if song is good or song is bad, because song will be there. Will it be number 1? No, but song's number 5, sure.
No, it's so mediocre. It's so mediocre. And this is the trap that always happens every year for me, is I go, oh, Diane Warren has a song. Oh, wow, it really sucks. Maybe they won't nominate this one. And then they do. Mm-hmm. Every time. And so I feel like I'm going to make the same mistake this year where the shortlist is going to come out and I'm going to go, oh, well, like, Sometimes You Do from 4 Good Days is really not good enough to make that nomination. I'm going to take it out of my 5. But then they do it.
Yeah.
And I do the death race, too. I watch all the nominated films. I watch the films that are nominated for song, even if it's just a song that's in the credits. I'm going to have to watch Tell It Like a Woman. As you can tell, I'm not excited for this. But anyways, some music that did not disappoint this week. We got the first taste of the Babylon score. And, it's a banger. It's a banger. What do you think, Dylan?
So I don't think
is it a banger or what?
I'm gonna spoil something for later bit in the show. We're gonna have some predictions at the end, and one of the categories we're doing is score. Babylon was previously when I was like, it could get snubbed. Babylon's not my number 1, and I'll leave it at that for now.
Really? Okay. Interesting. We'll talk about. I mean, it's not my number 1 either. But we'll talk about it more. We'll talk about Babylon and score. I don't know. I love the brass band sound. I love that energy. It reminds me a lot of one of my favorite jazz groups, Sons of Kemet. Mm-hmm. Like it feels, listening to it, I was like, wow, it actually feels like Justin Hurwitz kind of ripped their style, which a lot of people aren't going to know because I'm going to assume a lot of people don't listen to Sons of Kemet, but they have a very singular style with, like, they use a lot of tuba and a lot of trombone, and they do that sort of Afrobeat drum-driven sound in the jazz genre. And it really feels like he kind of ripped that, which there's no shame in stealing. I don't know if he did steal, but it feels to me like he stole, and I feel like someone like Justin Hurwitz would be aware of Sons of Kemet. But I don't know. I love the sound of it, and I'm never opposed to hearing more music like music that I already like. So I'm very interested in that. But anyways, we're going to move right into the Virginia Film Festival. And we're going in order of these films, in the order of which you saw them. So the first film... Oh, and by the way, there will be no spoilers in here. We're not going to spoil anything. These are all films that are pre-release, so you are safe to hear everything. And I say that right now because the first film that we're about to talk about right now is Glass Onion. So again, no spoilers whatsoever. We might do a little bit more of a spoiler discussion when the film actually releases, but right now, nothing. You're safe to listen. We will be very, very guarded with anything we say. So Glass Onion, what's your take on this, Dyl? It's your first movie of the festival. What'd you think?
I want to tie this all full circle moment right here. Very early in this podcast, we had an episode where Matt missed because he was at his film festival for TIFF. And I brought on a bunch of guests and I said, if you can make your dream film festival for using only movies from this year, what would it be? And I said for mine, my opening night film would be Glass Onion because I want to start off with a high. I want everyone to be happy, be energetic, and be just ready to dive into the rest of the festival. And that's what Glass Onion exactly was for the Virginia Film Festival. It had me on a high. I loved it. Dare I say, I liked it more than the original Knives Out. I have not Obviously, I
Same.
saw the first Knives Out like 4 or 5 times. I've only seen Glass Onion once, so I can't really compare them. But I'm sure when rewatches, Glass Onion's going to hold up. I'm going to find new things to love about this movie because this mystery is so deep and it's so interesting. No spoilers. And I didn't pick up on anything the first time until they tell you, and I'm like, whoa, I did not see that coming. Maybe on a second time I could see it coming, but that's the beauty of these type of movies is you get something new every time. And I think that really adds to a film's score and why it should be highly regarded.
Yeah, I think that you got to bang on with this. It is personally, I agree. I like it better than Knives Out. I've seen Knives Out probably 3 times now, and this one I've only seen once. But I'm so looking forward to unraveling the layers of this one. It's so much fun. It's got an amazing ensemble here. So, who was your favorite member of the ensemble?
So I feel like there's a few clear answers. So I'm just going to run down my top 5. Because this ensemble's great, and everyone's great. Just because I don't mention someone doesn't mean I thought they were bad. But I felt like these 5 all gave something very interesting. The first one I want to highlight, of course, is Daniel Craig. He's the only holdover from the first movie, but it's not like he's playing the same beats. Benoit Blanc is not the same character of the first movie. He has new dynamics. He has new angles, new layers, you could say.
He's a little bit
Onion.
Goofier, too.
Yes.
He's much goofier in this one.
Which I think really adds, because I think one thing that if someone was a little bit worried about watching this movie, like, oh, they're making a sequel? Why would they make a sequel sort of thing? They're going to ruin the tone, ruin the mood. His character just shows you, hey, we're not doing the same thing again. Yes, it's a murder mystery. Yes, it's going to be funny. But guess what? We're going to reinvent the script. We're going to flip it on its head, and we're going to do something different. And Benoit Blanc is a character that's over from the first one, but he's completely redone, and I think it's done very well. The next few I want to highlight include Madeline Klein. Does she do a lot in this movie? Not really, but she knew what her character was supposed to be and nails it on the head.
Is she Dave Bautista's girlfriend?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Good to know.
And then, speaking of Dave Bautista, he was really funny. If I had to pick like a funniest performance, it probably would be him. And then we have Kate Hudson, which gives a very, I think, relevant and interesting performance for her character, just with a lot of stuff going in the news. She could pick, like, yeah, she's this celebrity, she's that celebrity. Put them together, and that's what her character is. And it's like, I like this. I like how, because you can make the complaints about other movies that are very, like, on the nose, like Don't Look Up from last year, or even Triangle of Sadness from our last episode that we talked about. Like, they're making fun of celebrities and they're making fun of people in the media, but they're so on the nose that you can clearly tell who they're talking about. But her character just felt like, this is just one portion of, like, Hollywood, and we're just going to make fun of it, but we're not going to point fingers and be like, it's just this one person, it's just that person. And then we have the person who everyone is giving raves about, and that's Janelle Monáe, who gives a great performance that I can't wait to rewatch. Not just theirs, but everyone that's cast, top to bottom. Just because I didn't mention someone like Leslie Odom or Edward Norton, they were still great in it as well.
I think it's so hard when we talk about Janelle Monáe in this film, because we really can't say much about what their role is without spoiling large chunks of the film, which is why it's really hard for us to say, like, oh, they're the best in this movie, which I do think that they're the best in this movie, and I would personally say that they are one of my favorite performances of the year in general, but we can't talk much about what they do in the film, which is so interesting, because when people, I've seen people online talking about, you know, why is everyone talking so much about Janelle Monáe? Is that a spoiler that they're talking about their character in the film? Like, is that hinting that they might be? No, you have no idea what's coming.
Yes.
And that's why we can't talk about it, because there's so much in that performance that, like, would so easily be spoiled. So we're not going to say anything about it other than that Janelle Monáe truly is incredible in this film. But that brings me to the last point before we move to the next movie, Oscar chances. I know all year long we've been kind of thinking, can this be picture? Can this be in supporting actress? Screenplay? And personally, my passion pick for this film would be production design. But what do you think? Can it make these categories? Where do you see it landing with the Oscars?
See, I think there's 2 routes Glass Onion could do, and I feel like we talked about this on the show before. It's the all or nothing type package, where this is going to get picture, screenplay, supporting actress, maybe even production design, maybe even score. or it's the flip side where it's just screenplay like the first one. And right now, with the Save the Race and how everything looks, especially after the Pinocchio reviews have come out, and looking at Netflix's like for your consideration screenings from the various films, whether it is Pinocchio, Bardo, Glass Onion, even The Good Nurse, Glass Onion is not very high on its like number of screens. That could be because they want to wait for the movie to actually come out so spoilers don't happen, but at least at this very moment on November 14th, it's not very high in the number of screenings. So to me, it seems like this is a screenplay, which I don't think it's screenplay or bust, because screenplay's getting in regardless. It's just will more come along with it, just with how weak adapted it is. I think the screenplay is number 3 right now. It's 2 or 3 depending on your take of a movie I saw later in the festival that we'll get into here shortly. But it's number 2 or 3 in adapted screenplay. Supporting actors, I think if it's in picture, it's in. Those are a combo. Mm-hmm. And then production design obviously would come along if it's like not a picture 10, but like a picture 7 or 6 sort of thing.
Dude, the production design is so good. They just nail how an eccentric billionaire with no taste would live. And that's why I love it so much. It's just so big and eccentric while being so mismatched. And oh god, I think it's one of my biggest dream nominations of this year would be plopping it in production design. But I took it out of my production design 5 this week, and it breaks my heart. But yeah, that's the thing that I feel is I think Netflix wants this to be in Best Picture more than anything else this year. But I think no matter how hard they campaign it, people are just going to be like, wow, that was a silly, fun movie. I'm not voting for it.
That's
but I think
exactly...
it's going to make PGA. I think this is Borat.
Well, that's exactly how I feel, because I mentioned it to you when you went to TIFF. I was like, if Glass Onion's for real, it's either placing 1 or 2 at TIFF. And I thought, Virginia Film Festival is easily going to win the Audience Award, which it didn't. We'll get into what movie did win it later, because that choice is a little bit boggling to me. I get it. Which Matt will give his case once we get to that movie, but I don't want to spoil it out there for the people who don't already know what that movie is. So we're going to move into the next one I saw, because I saw Glass Onion Wednesday night opening night film. So now we're moving into my Thursday movies, which I saw 2. And the first one was Bad Axe, a movie that Matt got to see a little bit ago, a documentary, which we kind of feel the same while being a little bit different. We have the same thoughts, but just our scores
You're a little bit
off.
higher on this movie than I am. Because personally, when I saw Bad Axe, which is a documentary about a small town in Michigan and a family, an Asian family who was operating a diner during the COVID outbreak. And personally, I guess my thoughts on the film were it had a lot of very interesting big things to say, but it felt too much like a home video to me. And it didn't feel like the director had enough perspective outside of that home video feel. And so did you feel that too, that it was maybe a little bit too home video-y?
I definitely got the home video-y feel. I think that works to the movie's favor. I think that's where our scores range a little bit, from me being like a little bit higher than you. Like, I think if I remember right, I was like a 7, you were like a 6, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I give it like a decent 6.
Yeah, and I was like a very low 7 sort of thing. So we're just slightly off. I just felt like the home video stuff gave it a little bit, like it made you feel like a part of the family, a part of the group, which I think was definitely the thing it was going for. My issue is more the movie leaves you with, like, as Matt was saying, there's a lot of ideas here. Just what are you supposed to take away? I get like very base level, like, we still experience racism, and the election and COVID had a lot to do with our small community here, but the bigger picture of like, okay, so what now sort of thing, it was like I really liked everything I saw. I just didn't really know what the movie wanted me to get out of being like, here's our family for like an hour and a half.
Yeah, well, okay, I guess, have you seen the documentary Minding the Gap? I
have not.
Okay, you'd really, really like that documentary. It's a film about 3 friends who are skateboarders, and they're all from working class families, and each of them uses skateboarding as a way to get away from the reality of their life. And we follow them over the course of like 10 years as their lives change. And the thing about that is that one of the 3 friends is the director of the film. But despite the fact that he's also one of the subjects of the film, and these are his best friends from childhood, it feels like he has a lot of perspective and he can criticize them and talk about that. That's what it didn't feel like this film could do. That said, I thought that it's very important what it was talking about, especially in speaking about the rise of anti-Asian hate crimes and a lot of the horrible shit that was happening in 2020, and of course is still happening around the Asian American community in regards to treatment, especially by people in rural areas who blamed COVID on Asian Americans, despite the fact that Asian Americans obviously have nothing to do with COVID. And so I really liked seeing that perspective and getting that look into the world. I just feel as though, like what I said with Minding the Gap, that film allowed for a lot of perspective and a lot of detachment from the fact that this is a filmmaker making a movie about his best friends from childhood. This didn't feel like it had that same detachment. The entire time it did feel like a home video to me, and that's what brought it down a little bit lower. But I love what it's talking about overall. And then afterwards, you saw another film that I've seen at TIFF. I promise we'll later on get into some films that I haven't seen. I'll just have some questions for you. But you saw Devotion, and this one's a little bit special because you got complimented by Jonathan Majors himself at the Q&A. So what was that experience talking to Jonathan Majors, like seeing Devotion, and then having him compliment your outfit?
Definitely. So, as Matt just said, it was an experience to say the least. So we sit down to watch Devotion. He's like 3 rows in front of me. I see him there with whoever he came with. I don't know if it was his family or just a group of people, but I could see him.
Oh,
and
he
then
sat through the movie?
Mm-hmm.
That's wicked cool of him.
And
he's probably seen it like 10 times now.
And then he went up to the stage. Or before the movie, he got the Breakthrough Artist Award, the Virginia Film Festival Breakthrough Artist Award. So he had a little bit of like a speech before we watched the movie. Afterwards, he comes out and there's an interview with an interviewer from the Hollywood Reporter, and they ask him some questions. He goes through talking about the movie a little bit, and then they open the discussion up for the audience. And I quickly try to rush to the side because they had the mics on the 2 sides, and I was like in the front middle because like in years past, Q&As are just raise your hand, they call on you sort of thing. So it's like, okay, I'm gonna get front settle right in front of them, so that if they want a question, I'm right there. I'm the first person they see. But there was that. I was like the 3rd person in line on my side. Just sadly for the Q&A, it kind of got ruined when one guy asked about Marvel and says like, "Oh, you were in Loki and now you're going to be in Ant-Man. So what's it like playing 2 of the same characters but they're slightly different?" And then as you could probably guess, he couldn't really answer the question since Ant-Man's not out and NDAs and all that stuff.
And it's also a Q&A for a different movie. Like,
yeah.
Marvel,
and then
oh
at the end of his question, he's like, "Oh, also, I have a boxing glove. You're going to be in Creed 3 or 2 or whatever. Creed 3, can you sign it?" And then he signed it because he's a nice guy. But then like his manager's like, "Okay, we're done." And then a bunch of people like ran up to the stage like, "Oh, he's still there. He's talking to some people." So like I went up there too. I was just again on the wrong side. The other side's where people were like mainly going like, he was taking like 3 from that side, 1 from this side. And at the end, his manager's like, "Okay, we really got to go." But he turns this way. We get a picture. He's like, "I really like your jacket. It's really cool." And I was like, "Whoa, that's so nice." For people watching on YouTube, I'll throw up a picture on one of these sides. And yeah, it was really nice. I wish I could say the same thing about the movie. I feel bad. I didn't really like Devotion. Devotion is like the most average movie in every aspect. I think my Letterboxd review was an amazing performance, but like I don't remember what it was, but he's really good in the movie. Just the rest of the movie is so painfully boring and like uninteresting.
Yeah, I think when I first talked about it on the podcast, I called it Mid-Gun instead of Top Gun, and it seems like you agree with that assessment.
Yeah, I think there's some very interesting things the movie does. It doesn't really help that Top Gun came out this year, and Top Gun does all those things a lot more interesting. But I think what Majors is doing in the film is really good, and I'm surprised, especially with how weak Best Actress this year, that he hasn't popped up anywhere for like maybe a long shot type nomination. Because I could not see him in the 5. I could see him like a 10 or a 15 list, definitely over some other people I've seen thrown into 10 or 15 list. And but outside of that, this movie's pretty much dead across the board for any awards. I'm really interested to see how this movie plays for a wide audience, because this is not a people pleaser movie. Like, I don't see this being a movie people come out like, "Oh yeah, I need to watch that again," or "I'm going to recommend people to go watch that," because the movie doesn't really end on a happy tone. And the aerial sequences are interesting, but they're not like bro moments like in Top Gun where it's like, oh, plane battles or planes between the mountains. It's just planes doing plane stuff. But
no, they're not spectacular. Like they're good aerial sequences.
Yeah.
They're just not amazing.
But yeah, overall, the Q&A was really interesting. Definitely the weirdest Q&A I've ever been a part of. All the questions were very not what you would think a Q&A for Devotion would be like. But I still appreciate Jonathan Majors doing his best to answer the questions. And doing his best to stay. He's a very interesting interviewee. He doesn't really answer questions the way you think he would answer. Like the Hollywood Reporter interviewer was asking him questions, and he would kind of divert the question to something new. It's like, I really like what you changed like the question into, like the answer. And I mean, to compliment me on my style, he had a really cool outfit too. Like very, very chill vibes. He had the super high socks with like the short long pants, and it was definitely a good fit. But that was the end of my Thursday, and we end Thursday off on a kind of a mid note, and that brings us to my Friday, which we start off on a very, very, very low note with Florian Zeller's follow-up to The Father, which was my second favorite movie of that year, with one of my least favorite movies of this year being The Son.
Yeah, you had like a streak of movies that really disappointed you in this festival, because I know you were looking forward to Devotion too earlier in the year. Mm-hmm. But ooh man, yeah, you had a bad reaction to this. So just overall, I mean, we know I'm a bit higher on The Son than most people are. That probably would change when I watch it again, because I think my reaction was also based on the things that I didn't like about The Whale. I felt like The Son did better than The Whale.
Okay.
Although The Whale did a lot of things better than The Son. So I feel like if I watch it again, not having just seen The Whale, I'll feel a bit different about it. But what was your take on this film? Because we've heard mine. How do you hated it?
So
what did you hate most about it?
So in the past few weeks, when we've done our Oscars and our Best Picture rankings, I still had The Son on my Best Picture like top 20. And every week is like, why do you still have that there? It's definitely not getting nominated. And that was because of people, not just you. I've seen a lot of, especially on film Twitter, a lot of the pundits there, like you mentioned about The Son, they like The Whale too. Or no, sorry, they like The Whale. They like The Son too. Like they were giving The Son 8, 7 out of 10. So I'm like, well, if these people are liking it, maybe it has a shot, sort of thing. And then I saw them like, I really don't get it, because it wasn't for me what a lot of people who have an issue with this movie is the ending. Not going to do spoilers or anything like that. Most people say the ending, that's your kind of take on the movie. If you like the ending, you can get with the movie. If you think the ending's bad, you're going to hate the movie. I didn't mind the ending. I thought the ending was very telegraphed, but I think the way they did it wasn't very bad. My issue comes with the rest of the movie. Every character's dialogue feels like they're robots, like an AI generator fed this script. What do people who are either depressed or know someone depressed, what do they say in that situation? And that's what they feed out. And none of it felt real. I understand that this movie was a play. Maybe it works a lot better on a play. I mentioned when we did our Filmball draft, Honor talked about this exact same thing of like, he like thought it worked well on a play, but he doesn't really know how it's going to translate to a screen. And I feel like I really hit the negative side of that, where I can definitely see how this would work as a play, but making it into a film where you can cut the camera, where you can adjust things to make it work better, I don't feel like they did any of that. They're just like, okay, here's our play script. We're going to use it for the film. We're not going to change anything. I don't know if that's true or not, but it felt like that, especially with the blocking of some scenes too. People just stand. They don't do anything. They stand. Or you have where people look happy and they pan away from one person and they pan back and the character goes from happy dancing mood to like this. Not even like crying or upset. He's just like dead. Like, I know you didn't watch Halloween Ends. He reminds there's a character that reminds me a lot of the main character in Halloween Ends. For the people who've seen both movies, take with that and run with it. But yes, overall, I thought mostly everyone in this movie was pretty bad. I think that comes mainly from the script. I don't think the script was doing them wonders. Like, to pick out one example here, Anthony Hopkins, love him as an actor. I think his win for The Father is much deserved. I think he's doing what he can in this movie. Just his lines of dialogue are the most generic, base level, angry dad lines. Angry dad lines where he's just like, my son sucks, blah, blah, blah. And that's all he can say. And he doesn't have anything else to say.
You came here to show me that you're a better father than I am.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know. I thought everyone was like, all the dialogue was cringy, especially Laura Dern. But if I had to pick out one performance, I was like, yeah, I can get behind it. Was Vanessa Kirby? Do I think she's doing anything special? No, but compared to everyone else, she's like, I don't have anything wrong with anything her not even character. I'm taking characters out because I think there's a lot of nuance maybe that could be seen with how these characters act in the situation. So I'm not talking anything about a character. I'm just talking about how they perform said character. And Vanessa Kirby's the only one I'm like, they didn't have a bad acting scene or their dialogue wasn't overtly bad. Where like Hugh Jackman does some really good things, but he also has some really, really bad scenes too.
So we've heard a lot of people talking about Jackman. I mean, both of us early in the year. Actually, no, I think you never were on the Jackman train, but I was. I said it's pretty undeniable that Jackman is just going to take it, especially now that Coleman Domingo is out of the race. I have taken that L and gone, okay, Jackman's not even getting nominated, but I see a lot of people still predicting Jackman getting an actor nomination. Now that you've seen the film, do you see any Oscar chances? Do you see a possibility of Jackman making it in still, or is that just like a pipe dream?
I think still
Not
just
even
because...
A pipe nightmare.
A pipe nightmare. I still think based off the reactions of like pundits on Twitter, because like I said, it's not just you, it's other people I've seen too that have like, whether it's YouTube channels, whether it's podcasts, whether it's websites, they give this son like an 8, they give this son like a 7. They say Jackman's really good, Vanessa Kirby's good, the script's fine, it's just this one thing I'm not really behind. And part of me is still like, yeah, Sony Picture Classics knows what they're doing. They can get him in. He's a big name. With how weak Best Actor is, he's my number 5 right now.
Really?
I still have him at 5. He dropped from 4 to 5 for me since the last time I verbally said my Best Actor. Tom Cruise leapfrogged him. That shows you the state of the race right now. Of Tom Cruise is my number 4 in Top Gun Maverick.
I'm going to have to interrogate you about this later because there's another film that we're going to talk about, which I know you didn't like as much.
Yeah.
But I think you're wrong here.
I probably am. I would like to see... We'll talk more about that movie when we get there.
We'll talk more about that.
I had the reverse claim for The Sun that I do for that movie, because the same people who give The Sun high grades kind of give that movie low grades. But yeah, you mentioned before, I've never really been on the Jackman train. I was Domingo. Once Domingo fled, I was Austin Butler. I'm still Austin Butler. Most people are Fraser or Colin Farrell. I still have Butler at 1. I just think once we get into TV awards, I think he could take them all. But that's neither here nor there now. But yeah, The Sun overall, I think Jackman still has a shot. And with how bad adapted screenplay is, I think there's a long shot for it. I think it's in the 10, but I don't think it's in the 5. Like, I think it's like 10, 11 right now, but I don't think we'll get there at the end of the day.
Yeah. Okay, now our next movie, this is the first one that I have not seen. So I just have a lot of questions for you because I've heard a lot of mixed things across the board. And this is one that I still have in my Best Picture top 10. As She Said, Maria Schrader, the Harvey Weinstein investigation movie. So my first question that I have for you here, before you get into your thoughts on the movie and everything, can Carey Mulligan go all the way? That's the biggest question I have about this.
For a win, I don't think so. For a nomination, I think she's almost assured to get in. I don't really think she's doing all too much. I also think she's very, very solidly a supporting character in this movie. I understand why some people may think she's the lead. Zoe Kazan's, I think, handles the majority of this film, where she's the focal character, even though I don't think this movie really has a focal character. I think you could kind of get away with this being like Women Talking, where they're kind of all supporting. But I know that's not the popular take out there. This movie's more about the people they interview. They're the ones showing, like, doing the showy performances, while Mulligan and Kazan are kind of just being base level. We're reactionary characters. We are the vessel for them to communicate. And that thing, in a normal year, I don't think this gets in. But with how empty supporting actress is, I think she can get in, because I think jumping a little bit ahead to just Oscar chances and all for this movie, I think this is a very big, it's getting a few nominations or it's getting 1. I don't think this is a movie that could just get like 2. Like, it doesn't have many categories to really compete in as well. We'll dive more into that when we get into the actual Oscar segment of this film, but this is a movie that knows what it is. It's very isolated in those specific categories, but in those categories, I feel like that's pretty good to get a nomination.
Mm-hmm. Something we've talked about a lot on the show, and that we've feared a lot with it, is that this would feel a bit self-congratulatory, like Hollywood giving itself a pat on the back, saying, "We did it, Hollywood. We stopped the bad guy, the one bad guy, from doing bad things. We did it." And that was something that I think we've both felt was a bit of a concern for this movie. Did you feel that when you watched it, or did you feel like the subject matter was handled well?
I think it was handled very delicately and very well. I know we've disagreed about this in the past, like with Till, so I'm interested to see what you think about She Said, because like I thought Till was handled well. You didn't. If you want more detailed thoughts about that, people listening, we have a whole episode on that where we also talk about Tar.
And actually, I that's actually a great moment to address. Someone brought up in a comment that something that I said was incorrect, because I'd said about Till that there was a news article that said something that happened didn't happen. And so the news articles are out there, but I was redirected to watch a documentary which corrects that. So I will have to watch Till again, knowing now that it was historically accurate. Probably it might reverse some things that I felt about the film. But this is not a Till talk. This is She Said talk. And I'm very glad to hear that you felt it handled the material well. And I really hope that I feel the same way about it. I think I will. I think this is a movie that I'll like. It sounds like a movie that I'll like.
Yeah, this is a movie I don't think many people are going to have like, oh, this is my favorite of the year. But I think this is a movie that most people can get behind. Like, yeah, this is good. It handles its subject well. I feel like this movie's, I feel this is the easy cop-out, but I feel like this movie's just like Spotlight. And I liked it more than Spotlight. But I also am not a huge Spotlight fan. But I still think both are good movies. But I just feel like this movie is a little bit more interesting with its ways to do interviews and with how it shows specific things unfolding throughout. There was one, Matt also mentioned we were both a little bit nervous for this movie. I was also nervous that this movie would very much not glorify, but make Harvey Weinstein the only big bad and saying, like, oh, it's just him. He's the big scary guy and he's who we have to take down. And the movie does a very good job of showing like, yes, he is bad, he is evil, but he's not the only one. This has gone on long before him, and it's going to go on long after him, sort of thing. And I really like how you never really see his face, and you never really get him as a character. He's always, his presence is looming throughout the whole time, but there's no actor as Harvey Weinstein. Face forward, you see a back, like in the trailer, you see his back, but there's never his face. And I think that was a very well handled and very good thing that I really applaud this movie for doing, because while it's not glorifying him, it would be bringing more attention to being like, hey, this is the guy, he's our villain. And I felt like the movie did a good job avoiding that.
And something that I think was a danger was turning something I was really worried about is that they'd turn Harvey Weinstein into like an Oscar role, where it'd be like you have this horrifying villain who then becomes like some character actor's big chance to like make an impression, which would be really tasteless. Mm-hmm. But I'm glad to hear that they didn't do that. I'm really glad to hear that. So yeah, personally, I've got this in my Best Picture top 10, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But the next movie that you saw was one that actually just dropped on Netflix, and so I just got a chance to watch it this week too. But oh my god, My Father's Dragon, such a cute movie, so charming. And when we saw the trailer, both of us were a little bit underwhelmed by that sort of storybook look to it. But how did you feel about the film? Did you feel as though it delivered more than the trailer? Was it just a better version of the trailer? How did that storybook look feel to you in the movie?
I liked how it looked more in the movie than it did in the trailer. I felt like it very much fit the tone of the film and the film's themes and whatnot. This is a movie that's very interesting to me because there's some stuff I really like and some things I really don't like, but some of that's not the film's fault. Some of it's just the casting. But I really, really dug the first act of this film, like the first 10 to 15 minutes. That may be like the darkest part of the movie, but I felt like with the film's themes and where it was going for, it really worked in that first act. And then it was kind of like you peak high and then you continuously kind of go low, 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 and then you come back up at the end. And like the animation here is great. I thought the script was fine. I thought most of the character voiceover work was pretty good. There's just some small things here and there. It's like, I really don't like that, but I also don't think that's really the movie's fault. I kind of think more of that lies to casting.
Right, because so in terms of casting choices, like what specifically are you talking about that you weren't vibing with?
I don't want to be mean, but I really don't like Gaten Mazzarato as an actor. Every time he's in something, it's very off-putting for me. He's just very over the top, which I get is some people's things. Like in Stranger Things, like I get that kind of works for the role. Here as Boris the Dragon, kind of like detriments the whole thing for me. I don't really have much knowledge of the book ahead of time, but watching it was just like, this is really just. I get it's kind of supposed to be annoying, but it was like so effective of being annoying. It's like, it's making me upset. But Overall, I thought the movie was fine. In terms of Oscars and sort of thing for animated feature, I think we made this bold claim early in the season. It's kind of working out well for us now, where Pinocchio is the movie to beat, even long before anyone else was saying Pinocchio was the movie to beat. And that's also Netflix. And for some reason, I thought My Father's Dragon was Apple. It's not. It's Netflix. And Netflix
because Wolfwalkers was Apple.
And Netflix has Pinocchio, it has this, it has Wendell and Wild, and it has CB. So that's 4 animated contenders where they probably realistically can only get 2 in. We know Pinocchio is one of them. Mm-hmm. So we've seen Wendell kind of drop. CB's kind of came and went. So that kind of leaves My Father's Dragon, which would not be a bad nomination to me. The animation alone, I think, deserves the spot. And I think the movie's solid enough as it is.
It's so incredibly charming. And yeah, I mean, also, Netflix also has Apollo 10.5, which was disqualified and then requalified. Mm-hmm. So they've got a lot of animated films. But yeah, I mean, I saw Pinocchio this week. Pinocchio is winning. It's 100% winning. So seeing this and then Pinocchio, I was like, oh, yes. Yeah, no. One of these is winning, but both are getting nominated for sure.
That reminds me, this movie also had a Q&A panel that had the director, had the screenwriter, the producer, who was also on the board for the Virginia Film Festival, and the sound designer, which was, I thought, a really interesting ad for a kids film to have, or a family film to have them present for a Q&A. And one thing I thought was like the most interesting part of the Q&A is all the questions they took from the audience were from kids. So it was kids asking, oh, what does this character mean? Or what does this character do, sort of thing. So I thought that was just a very...
actually really cool,
interesting dynamic that added to it. And I didn't know, but the director, I feel bad, I'm gonna Google it now. Well, the
Nora
director,
Twomey.
She also directed The Breadwinner, which is another very good film, and the screenwriter helped write Inside Out, which is another great family film.
I did not know that. Yeah, personally, I would say The Breadwinner is not a film that I really like. It's my least favorite cartoon saloon movie. I really love Wolfwalkers. I really love Song of the Sea. I really like The Secret of Kells. This one I like quite a bit. Actually, I think I'm higher on this film than you are, but we both gave it a 7 out of 10. Mm-hmm. And yeah, overall, I really like this one. But it's still a lower tier cartoon saloon movie for me. It's not Wolfwalkers.
And then just to give credit where credit's due, the screenwriter is Meg LaFleur, who also, in addition to Inside Out, has worked on Onward, and they will be writing Inside Out too.
Oh, that's awesome. That's very, very cool. Okay, well, she's someone to watch out for then. Good Pixar writer. All right, and the next movie that you saw, this is a big one. This is one of the most hyped up films of the year.
Of all time.
It is the undisputed Oscar winner in every category, including documentary short. That movie is The Power of the Donkey, EO. So EO's just been like a huge meme all year long. It's a film starring a donkey, about a donkey, following a donkey. It's very experimental. I was very worried about how you'd feel about the film. So overall, I've hyped this up a lot. I've seen it 3 times. Did it live up to the hype that I've put on it? Or did you feel like a little bit off about this movie?
Oh, it 100% lived up to the hype, the anticipation, everything. This is the one movie I did not get a ticket for. I had to send a standby line for. And in fact, I was the most committed to The Power of the Donkey. I was the first person in the line. I waited for about an hour, and I got in. And it lived up. The first scene alone with the cinematography, the way it's shot, I was like, okay, yes, I'm down for this. And the movie kept going, and I kept loving every choice it made. Yes, it is very surreal. It is very experimental. It does things in a very different way, but I felt like every choice was done right. And I really hope other people feel the same as this. I know some people who sat around me did not really like it. I know other people who really loved it. I know some people who couldn't sit through the whole movie because of how much it was just so much emotional for them, where they're like, I wasn't expecting to come in and being like my heart broken. And overall, I hope that EO can go all the way for a Best International Feature. Right now, I have it as my number 5. Is that more wishful thinking? Maybe, but if it's selling out screens, if eyes are laying on the movie, I still think there's a case for a film to be more seen than a film that may get a little bit more consensus positives, but is a lot less seen.
No, my take on it is that this is this year's Titan. It's a film that is very bold, very experimental, very out there. It's going to have a devoted audience that really loves it, maybe a big audience. I would say Titan had a bigger audience than most international films last year that were submitted, and yet it's just so out there that it struggled to connect with voters. And I think that's the way that this is going to go down too. And that breaks my heart because this is one of my favorite movies of the year. It's in my top 10 of the year. I think is it in your top 10 of the year?
It is. I think it's at 7, 6, something like that. It's not in the top because I have like a top 4, top 5 right now. It's in that next tier below it.
Right. And it's a great film, but I see this as this year's Titan.
Mm-hmm. I
we'll
can
have
definitely
to
see that.
We'll have to see.
We'll see going forward because the international race is a very interesting one because there's not. I think there's a case you can make for like 4 movies to win, some stronger than others, and then after that, I think there's like 6 movies fighting for that last spot, and it's just like which one gets in that last spot unless something else gets snubbed out of that top 4.
And there will be snubs. That's
just the nature of the beast with that category.
They snubbed a hero last year, so something's going to get snubbed this year as well. And after that, you saw another one of my absolute favorite movies of the year, and this is probably the biggest Oscar contender that you saw at the festival, and that's Women Talking. Now, we're going to do a full segment on this in another episode when the movie releases so that we can go deeper into spoilers, talk more about details and everything. But overall, this is, has been all year long in the top 3 for Best Picture, really. And after hearing so much about this, after hearing all the Best Picture hype, how did you feel about this? Did it live up to the hype for you? Is it staying kind of close to the top of that picture list for you? Or are you a little bit more apprehensive on the film?
No, I think it definitely, just like EO, it lived up to the hype, and it wasn't what I thought it was, but in a good way. Like, EO, I was expecting it to be something different, but it wasn't, and I liked that. And this was the same thing. Like, yes, I knew it was women talking and a barn, but the way they did it was a lot different than what I thought it would, like how it would be done. And I really appreciate, and I think my favorite thing about this movie is its ensemble. I don't think there's a weak link anywhere. I feel like when every watch, you could probably pick someone new to be your favorite from the group, because I feel like every person gets a moment to shine. Because there's always those ensemble movies where it's like, yes, the ensemble is so deep, it's so good, but not every character has that like scene stealer moment, that one moment where like, I'm the best. This movie, I feel like everyone, even the kids in the movies, get that one scene where they're like, okay, I can see the case for this person that could be the push, or this person to be someone's favorite in the film. I know we mentioned in previous episodes, like, oh, everyone's just picking these 2 or these 3 actresses, and I called out Arno for Rooney Mara, because I was like, no one picks Rooney Mara as their favorite, and you're like, well, Arno does, and guess what? Dylan does too, because that was my favorite on the first watch. I also really liked, I feel bad I didn't write down the character's name, but it was the narrator kid, the kid that was doing the narration. I liked that actress and the scenes where she was in as well. Those were probably my 2 favorite. They were my 2 favorite in the ensemble, but like I mentioned before, I'm sure when this movie comes out in about a month, wide release, I could have a new favorite, whether that is Frances McDormand in her 5 minutes of screen time, or it is Judith Ivey, who was there for a Q&A with this movie, or if it is the more Oscar contenders of Claire Foy, or so I don't know. I feel like this movie is very good. The screenplay is great. The ensemble is amazing. I like the direction. I even understand the color grade. I know you've explained why the color grade's there, and I can see it. It wasn't a huge issue for me. I understand why some people wouldn't like it, but I really think it helps because there's a name drop of a specific year that's all it takes place in. And I feel like without that color grade, that name drop of the year would really ruin something. But because the color grades didn't make it feel timeless, you're like, okay, I can rock with this.
Yeah, totally. And so you mentioned that the narrator kid was one of your favorites. The 2 kids are Kate Hallett and Liv McNeil. I'm pretty sure, and at least in David Ehrlich's review of the movie, he mentioned that Liv McNeil was the one narrating it. But I'm not 100% sure. I know which one's which, but I couldn't tell which voice it was. Pretty sure it's Liv McNeil, though. But fun fact about Liv McNeil, when I first heard that Liv McNeil was in the film, I was like, why does that name sound familiar to me? That's really weird that name sounds familiar, because I checked their Letterboxd and she has no other credits. This is her first movie. And then I was like, wait, Liv McNeil goes to high school with my fiance's little brother.
Nice.
And the reason I know that is because during quarantine, there was this video that was shared widely on Facebook in Toronto. And the reason it was shared was because this kid from, again, my fiance's little brother's high school, she had made for a class project a short film. And I remember that short film blew up. It got like 200,000 views on YouTube. It was just a class project that she did. But I remember at the time, Sarah Polley shared this short film. And I saw someone like post a screenshot of Sarah Polley's Facebook being like, take a look at this film made by a 14-year-old at blank high school. I'm not going to dox the kid and say what high school it is. But I saw that Liv McNeil was in the film, and I was like, oh my god, that's why I know the name, is because Callum goes to high school with her. And so when I played Women Talking at my festival, Callum came to see it, and I basically told him, I'm like, yo, Liv McNeil is the narrator of this film. You have to go and track her down at school. And he did, and congratulated her. And I think literally after the movie finished, he like sent her a text being like, I just saw your movie that you're starring in. Okay. But yeah, so that's my story about Women Talking. She's just like a random kid. I'm glad to hear that the color grade worked for you as well, because it works for me too. And last thing I want to talk about before we move on, again, we will talk about Women Talking further on the show, because it is going to be a staple in the Best Picture race all year long. But the music, how was the music for you? We disagree a lot on scores, but with this one, how'd you land? I love the music.
I liked it a lot too. I think it's one I really want to listen to again, because if I remember right, they use the same theme a lot of times throughout, reoccurring. But that theme's really good though. The one track that is available in streaming now, I like a lot. It's in my personal playlist that I make for like every month. Like, these are the songs I listen to for the month for the most part. It's in that playlist, so that's a good sign. So I really like the music during it. That's one of my favorite aspects of the film as well, and I can't wait to hear it more. I think Hilder's going to be nominated again. I think it's right now I'm at number 2 for score behind Babylon, as I mentioned before, but that's a category we'll talk about a little bit later, so I'll say that for then.
Yeah, so in terms of the score as well, you mentioned that like there's the one theme that gets used quite a lot through the film. However, on a second watch, what I really noticed is that Hilder does her thing where there's a lot of really dark sounds and kind of like a bit of soundscape. Sorry, my cat is going insane. I'm just going to be right back. There's a lot of really interesting noises in there, and a lot of really rhythmic and percussive beats in the film. And I think that is really interesting about her score, because it is it's a pretty theme and it's a pretty melody, but then there's more to it. And I can't wait for the score to come out to really pinpoint all of those things in the film. Now, anyways, that's enough about Women Talking. Like we've said many times, we will talk about it more on the show. And the next one is another film that I deeply love, All the Beauty and the Bloodshed. I've hyped this up a lot about it being the documentary of the year. Was it your documentary of the year, or are you a bit more low on this than I am?
I was a bit more low. I think it has 2 stories here. I think the Nan Goldin story is very, very well done. I really like that part. I just thought the tie-in of the Sackler story and how Golden and her team are trying to take them down kind of dragged down the rest of the movie. I still get that's a very big part of her life and her overall journey. I just thought that portion wasn't as well done as the other one. It really killed the pacing whenever they brought it back in. But I fully understand why it's there. I really respect the movie for what or the documentary for what it's doing. I really liked its editing, its pacing for the most part, and the way it did interviews. There's never really a talking head interview. Maybe there's one instance of it, but for the most part it's all voiceover, which I think really adds, because you're seeing stuff happen. You're not like just watching this person talk the whole time, or if someone else besides Golden is talking, it's from a video of like you actually in a place, or you or you like in this scenario sort of thing. So I think it does a lot well. There's just other stuff I wish either could have been chopped or just done a little bit differently. I fully get why people and why this has won so many awards already. It just wasn't really my cup of tea.
It's interesting that you say that the life story worked more for you than the Sackler story, and it didn't feel like the Sackler story was adding as much to it. Because I actually personally, why I love this film so much is because I think that it uses her life story as a parallel to the current activism that she's doing. And without the current activism that she's doing, there's probably no movie made about her. Really, the exceptional, obviously, Nan Goldin is this incredible artist who has done so many incredible things. However, the reason for this movie is because she's taking on the art world and taking on the Sackler family, and that's what leads us into the other things. So for me, I don't know, I've said before on the show that I view this movie as like the best art documentary, like an art documentary done as well as you can, where you get an artist's whole life and you hear about like all the paths they took. And that's also a political activism documentary, and it does a great job of both of those. And then it kind of smushes them together. And I can see why that wouldn't feel cohesive to people, because it really does both. But to me, what it says is that all art is political, and that through her life, she's always made political art, and now she's literally fighting a political battle and using her art to take down, not to spoil anything, but to successfully take down a huge global industry. And I think that is truly incredible. And again, without the stuff with the Sacklers, I don't think that there is a documentary about Nan Goldin.
No, I fully agree. My more point was I felt like the Sackler stuff really killed the pacing. Like, I wish, like, I get it has to be there. I just wish it was done in another way or something like that, because the stuff about Goldin's life, whether it was her younger life, her family life, her trials and tribulations, without spoilers, that stuff was very, I thought, interesting done, while the Sackler stuff was just very kind of run-of-the-mill basic documentary type. Like, okay, here's news, show it, resolution, instead of the rest of it where it's done in a very artistic and very different type style. I guess would be my more, clarifying of the two sides.
But see, it's very interesting hearing you say this, because this kind of solidifies to me that I don't think All the Beauty and the Bloodshed is winning documentary anymore. Just because I think a lot of people are going to feel exactly the way that you do. And so I think that something like Goodnight Oppie, or one of the others, Navalny, maybe even Fire of Love, that sort of film is probably going to be the type of movie that wins Best Documentary this year. But on from documentary to international, you saw a little international film from Ukraine called Klondike. I know that you weren't a huge fan on this one, so what was your reaction overall to this? And do you think that this can make it into international feature?
I'll start off with the second part of that question. No, I don't think this will make it into international feature. And that's even not from me not being a huge fan of the movie. I think it is too small, even more so than EO. I don't think there will be a big passion behind it. I think there's some very good dynamics of this movie. I think the cinematography is very well. I think the actors are doing a great job acting and feeling emotion and showcasing. I just don't feel like the movie really... The movie's only like an hour 40 or an hour 50 if I remember, but it feels so much longer. And I don't feel like really much happens in that span. While it does have a clear, here's what we want to tell you sort of thing, and here's what's happening, I don't really feel like it really covers all that much, and it kind of circles a few times before you get to the final end, which you kind of can tell is coming. I also saw this starting at 11 a.m. on a Sunday morning, which probably was not the greatest Sunday morning kickoff.
Yeah.
But looking at the schedule, there wasn't really anything else that interested me in that first time slot. But the next time slot had two movies that were very interesting for different aspects. One being The Inspection, which I still haven't seen, but the other one being the one I saw, and which was the People's Choice winner at the Virginia Film Festival. And that was Sony Pictures Classics' Living.
Which is a film that I've talked about a lot, that I really love. And you definitely didn't like this as much as I do, right?
I did not. There was.
So why do you think this won the audience award?
Honestly, I remember I messaged you and I was like, I don't understand how, because first, this was nowhere near the most crowded movie I saw, so wouldn't it be the most votes sort of thing. But this was by far the most older skewing audience, and I have a good feeling the majority of people who went to this probably gave it the love rating because you had 3 options: love, medium, or hate. And those are your 3 things to pick for a movie. And to me, that feels very narrow. I would much prefer a 1 through 5 scale sort of thing, because like Living, I would not give a hate. I would not give a love. I would give it a middle, but I don't know if I would give it a high middle compared, because like another movie I gave a middle to was All the Beauty and the Bloodshed, but I like that a lot more than like Living sort of thing. But I think the older demographic that did show up for Living really enjoyed it. There's a lot of clapping at the end of the movie. The movie ends on a very positive, happy note, which will leave people leaving the theater a lot more happy to give this a love compared to A Woman Talking, compared to A Close, compared to some other movies that did show Devotion. I'm really, like I mentioned before, I'm really surprised that Glass Onion did not win just because of how crowd pleaser that movie feels. But I guess that goes back to our earlier conversation that we had of like people are not giving it or considering it the same way that they may consider another type of movie.
Mm-hmm. So obviously this didn't really land emotionally for you. I still recommend you should check out the Japanese original of the film, Ikiru by Akira Kurosawa. It is a classic. It's really, really great. And I know a lot of people are saying that this really pales in comparison to that. Personally, I do feel it pales in comparison to that, but I still loved Living. I just think it's impossible to make a masterpiece like Akiru as a remake. But even if emotionally it didn't land for you, I know you had a very strong reaction positively to the trailer and the text. Did you still feel that like the production design, the cinematography, the music, did those still work for you in the film?
Definitely. I feel like this movie's a very well-made movie. My biggest issue is it's just kind of boring. Bill Nighy's character in the film even says it's quite a bore, however. And that's kind of how I feel about this movie. Like, it's quite a bore.
Yeah, that was in your Letterboxd review.
Nighy is, like, good, and the texts are all very well done. It's just, like, I don't know. Maybe because I came out of Klondike and had, like, an hour to kill, and then I saw this. It's just, like, I don't know. Very down, and this didn't really help it. I thought that, like I mentioned before, I thought Nighy was good. The rest of the ensemble was all I thought very forgettable. The movie also feels like it wants to do something and kind of does it, and then just runs away from it and never goes back. And then at the end, it's like, oh, well, guess what? They actually did this sort of thing without getting into too many spoilers. But like it's like this character goes through something and you get a little glimpse of them like realizing, and then they actually never really act on it, sort of thing. And then there's like a grand reveal. But overall, yeah, I thought the texts were very good. I really like the score, the production design, the costumes. I could definitely see this getting a package of Nighy, maybe a costume at the Oscars, maybe an adapted screenplay with how light that category is, and that people really love this movie as this film festival show. Because if you look at previous winners, Nomadland won the award, and on the reverse side of that, Just Mercy also won the award, and that got goose-egged.
Right. Now, you mentioned that you could see it getting that package, but you don't have Bill Nighy in your Actor 5. And this is what I'm going to criticize you for right now, because I don't see any way that... Because Sony Pictures Classics, they know that The Sun is not happening. They know it's not liked. It has a 60 on Metacritic. They're releasing it in November, whereas they're giving Living the Parallel Mothers treatment, where they release it at the very last minute. They're going to make a splash at the specialty box office. I don't see how you have Jackman in your 5, but not Bill Nighy. So what's your logic behind that?
My logic more is, like I mentioned before, the same people who gave The Sun higher ratings, like the 8, the 7, are also giving Living like 6s and 5s. I've seen, whether it is from Twitter, whether it is from Letterboxd or YouTube or various pundits' websites. So not saying those people are the people who could vote, but those are people who are kind of in the scene sort of thing, who know people who could vote, or maybe sometimes they are voters themselves. I also feel like Jackman is a bigger name than Nighy, which could help. But I do agree. I've even been on your side on this earlier in the podcast and other episodes where Living does have the great release date. I was a believer of Parallel Mothers all season, with its release date, with its Penelope Cruz actress, with its... I don't think I had score, but I think at the end of the day I did have it as like my number 6 sort of thing. And I could definitely see that here. I just really want to see how this plays once it comes out, because I feel like this movie's specifically for like a specific target, and if it gets that target, it's going to hit very well. And like it could be that surprise of Oscar morning, and it's in 3, it's in 4 categories. It could be a surprise Nightmare Alley type Best Picture 10, where there's just a certain group that really loves this movie, but can also see the other consensus, the rest of the people being like, this movie's fine, and it leads it out. I don't know. You're probably right. Nahi probably should be higher than Jackman on my personal predictions right now, but right now they're 5 and 6, so they're right next to each other. So it's just like I mentioned. I forgot what episode it was, but we were like, I said Sony Picture Classics is getting someone in. I just don't know who it is yet. And right now I'm just leaning a little bit more towards Jackman, but all the signs are showing Nahi's probably going to be there at the end of the day.
I think you're underestimating just how respected Bill Nighy is by actors. Because yes, Hugh Jackman is a bigger star, but people love Bill Nighy, and he's never gotten his roses. Like, he's never been nominated, and yet he's this widely respected, largely theater actor, which is, I think, why people aren't predicting him as much, because a lot of the renown that he's gotten for his performances have been in the West End in the UK and on Broadway. And he's done a lot of film roles too, but he hasn't been as highly acclaimed for those. But I think actors really love him, and they're gonna jump to give him a chance to be awarded for this. I think it was Matt Neglia who on Twitter said that Living is giving him Philomena vibes. That, like, could this be something that just overperforms dramatically? And seeing that actually made me put it not in my Best Picture 10, but it made me consider it as a possible contender. Because, yeah, it really could happen. It could.
So, as you've seen here so far, my last few movies haven't been my favorite. After that, I saw a documentary about the James River here in Virginia. But after that was my little switch that Matt mentioned earlier in the show, where I switched from Empire of Light to go see what was probably the best movie. It wasn't my personal favorite. Probably the best movie I saw at the festival, though, being Close, which was amazing. Like, lack of words can really hit the angles here. Like, I don't really want to do spoilers, but
no, because the film is so good without. Because I also watched it not knowing a single thing about it, and it just, like, floored me. But, like, I'm so glad that you picked this over Empire of Light, because you were disappointed with Klondike, you were disappointed with Living, and then if you were to end that with Empire of Light, that would have just been, like, so sad. That would have been a disappointing day. But yeah, I mean, obviously this one is so powerful, and the two young actors here deliver really amazing performances. How did you feel about these young actors in this film?
Yeah, so no spoilers, not going to mention anything about the movie, its substance. I went in completely blind. All I knew, it was in another language. A24 produced it, and everyone I knew was saying how great this movie was. And obviously, I think the same. Both young actors are in my personal favorites of the year. I think they're both number 2 in lead actor and supporting actor. And I thought they were probably going to stick there for the rest of the season. I felt like the whole cast was amazing. One of the moms gives a very good performance as well. I felt like this movie very much accomplished everything it was trying to do, and I definitely see the avenue for international feature winner, as you mentioned a few weeks ago on the show. It's my number 2 right now. I'm still holding out a little bit for Bardo just because of its resurgence it's having right now, but I feel like if it's in a list of 5, Bardo could lose votes to the same crowd that would be like, oh, well, all Quiet on the Western Front's a technical marvel, and Decision to Leave is so precise. While Close, the people who are going to want to vote for Close aren't going to have like a second option. They're just going to all flock to Close. So I feel like it's probably very solid in for a nomination, and if it's in, it probably is going to be either number 1 or 2 for the win.
Yeah. Bardo is flashy. All Quiet is a spectacle. Decision to Leave is very thoughtful, and Close is emotional. And that's the arguments for all of those.
We go from talking about a very emotional movie to leaving the film festival. So the movie I most recently watched, which for me completely lacked any emotional connectivity, which is a very hot take, and that is the Banshees of Inisherin.
I am so shocked that you didn't like this film. Have you liked any Martin McDonagh films in the past?
The only other one I've seen is 3 Billboards, and I remember quite liking it. Have I watched it since the year it came out? No, but I liked it in the year, and I thought that both actors were they were in my like personal nominations for that year.
I'm like kind of aghast that you really just did not like this, because it's not just like you were indifferent to this movie, you just actually did not like this movie, right?
I mean, I gave it very strong 5, very light 6. I don't know. I just
Okay.
like I mentioned before, I just didn't feel any emotion for it. Like I didn't connect with any of the characters. I get what they're like. What I don't even know if I get what the movie's trying to like put off or say or comment on. I just didn't. I wasn't drawn in at first, and I think this is a movie if you can't connect with it right away, you're just gonna continue to get more lost as the movie goes on after more things start to happen. And for me, there's one character I sort of like. I kind of resonate a little bit, but then they don't really do much throughout, which is really interesting because they're a character who's gotten a lot of buzz from this. I don't want to give major spoilers, but because this movie just came out, it's everything on here. Even if I don't love it, I will always recommend going to see something because as shown here, one person could love it, one person could not. I feel like every movie, if you have the time, is worth watching, no matter how good or how bad one person could think it is. But Banshees, for me, I don't know. I thought some scenes were funny, but other scenes just were like, I don't really know what I'm supposed to be doing right now.
There's so much that I'm surprised to hear here. And the main thing that I'm really surprised about is you saying that you didn't feel it was, like, that you didn't feel any emotional connection. Because that was something I loved the film. I gave it a very light 9 out of 10. Very light 9 out of 10. I think it could go up for me, though, on a rewatch. But the thing that I'm surprised by is that I did find it emotional. I did feel very impacted. I felt like it had a lot to say about loneliness and about isolation and about living in a small community and feeling like you deserve more than that. But also, I don't know. I loved the commentary on the Irish Civil War. I love the way that it talks about how pointless feuds are and how small disagreements can escalate into harsh violence. But truly, I think that this is one of the saddest films of the year, which is why I'm a little bit surprised to hear that there was no emotional connection for you, because to me, this is a tragedy of the highest order, and it really made me feel very sad and very sorry for these characters who, one of them feels trapped in this community that he feels as though he's grown larger than, and the other one doesn't feel the need for anything more than the simplicity he has in life, which is suddenly ripped away from him. And I found it so very sad, and like Barry Keoghan's character is so heartbreaking, and Colin Farrell is my number one and lead actor. I wasn't too hot on Carrie Condon, who a lot of people are saying could win supporting actress, which I don't get. But yeah, this is one that I really responded positively to. But this is why we have this podcast, to talk through these things. And like I said, the performances did really stick out to me. How did you feel about the performances? Did you connect with Gleeson or Farrell or Keoghan on any level, or did you feel left cold by those?
I think overall, I just really either missed a step or missed something with this movie, because I think that also goes here for the performance as well. While I wouldn't be upset at a Colin Farrell win, he would definitely not be my pick. I really do resonate with Farrell's character's isolation in the movie. I just didn't connect with his, not actions, but himself. Like what he's going through, I resonated with, but how he's going through it, I didn't really resonate or connect with. Overall, though, I thought the performances were great. My personal thoughts on this movie aren't affecting my Oscar chances. In fact, I moved it up in almost every category when I did my most recent things, because everyone else is so in love and enamored with this film, and so much praise is going from left to right. And I'm not going to let my personal, I wasn't the hugest fan of this movie really detract it, because it's in my top 4, not for picture. It's it has my number 2 in supporting actor. I have 2 supporting actors in there. Condon right now is my 1 in supporting actress, just because I don't know what's going on in that category. I just know for a fact Carey Mulligan's not winning, and I really don't think one of the women talking actresses are going to supplant the other one without one of them being snubbed. I think if one gets snubbed, that one automatically wins, but with them both being there, I think they're going to steal votes. And just so many people are so high on this movie, I feel like Condon could rise to the top and kind of win, kind of like the COVID year when Minari and Young Jun-yoon won, just because there's no real front runner and someone eventually has to come up to the top, and it's the one that in a movie that people like that can't award it in any other category.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. Okay, here's the $1,000,000 question that I've been grappling with all year. Does this go drama or comedy at the Globes?
I think they would be dumb to put it in drama. I think the comedy aspects are some stuff that does work, at least for me in this movie. I think it has a better chance to win awards in comedy as well. But the Globes are the one who gets to pick, and I feel like there's a case for both. I feel like there's no wrong answer here for its actual placement, but if you're looking for more wins and more nominations, then comedy would be the way to submit, at least.
Okay, so because I think it's going drama, and so that's we're 50-50 on that. So from one movie that we very much disagree with to another movie that we also very much disagree on.
I'm just a hater this week.
I know. Sometimes, like on our Till and Tar episode, I was the one who was very low on the two films that you felt much more positive on than I did. But on this episode, I'm the positive one and you're the negative one. Because we've got Black Panther Wakanda Forever, which is a film that I really responded very strongly in a positive way to. And meanwhile, you felt extremely let down by this one. So I'll let you speak a little bit to talk about why you were let down, and then I'll counter a few things, I suppose.
Okay, so I guess basis off, I don't want to compare it to the first Black Panther, but I feel like it's inevitable with it being a sequel. And I feel like almost everything the first one did, the second one was a step down, whether that is the cinematography, whether that is the score, the costumes, the production, the editing.
Not on the costumes.
The one thing I think this movie does improve from the first one is its world building. I feel like this one has, maybe that's just a venture of this place. This movie takes you to like 20 different places. There's so many little title cards saying Virginia, Wakanda.
It went pretty
Latin
close
America.
to home to you.
It's like an hour and a half. That's like DC-ish. It's like right on the border.
It's a fully different world.
Exactly. Yes. And I don't know. I just feel like this movie was just left so cold. I don't really even know really where to start because I want to avoid spoilers as well. This movie just came out. It's a lot of stuff. The stuff I really like the most, I think, are the spoiler scenes. Whether it's the first scene, the last scene, or one scene that happens in the third act. And they're, I think, the three most impactful emotional moments, which I feel like this movie does a very good job of expressing emotion and showcasing emotion. But the rest of the movie very much lacks emotion. And there's some characters that they completely do 180s on, because it's a Marvel movie. You need to have the joke character. So M'Baku is strictly for jokes. Or some of the people of Wakanda who are in the first movie have like one scene where they pop up in. Or Riri is solely a joke character who has no real substance in the film other than to set up a TV show that I learned after watching the movie. I had no clue who the character was before the movie started in the movie. And then afterwards, like, oh, that's just for a TV show. But the one thing I want to leave, because I want to say positive things about this movie, I really like Namor. I think the character was very much on the level of Killmonger from the first movie in various ways, whether it was from an acting, whether it was from a performance, or just a written. I thought that was mainly the highlights of the movie. As you mentioned, you had the trailer for Avatar before watching this. I also did. So that really kind of affected my thoughts on like the visual effects and the underwater stuff. I was like, oh, it could be so much better. And I also really like Lupita Nyong'o. Was she underused? Yes, but I thought the reason she was a very good reason. But like I mentioned, the two characters I really was drawn to the most and the two things I liked the most were very minor things in a nearly 3-hour movie when the first one was just under 2 hours.
So, okay, I mean, I mostly agree with you that yes, it is a step down from the first one, but it was never going to live up to the first one. It never was, and I think it was very silly for us to think that it could, especially with the hand that Ryan Coogler and the team on this film was dealt. Now, actually, I just want to say right now, let's just say we're going to go into spoiler territory. We will just give a blanket statement about that as just like, if you haven't seen the movie, get out of here, go to the next, like go 5 minutes forward or whatever. Because I want to be able to talk about these things, especially because, you know, people will have seen this movie at some point. So if you haven't seen it yet, just skip forward from this part, because we'll be able to talk a little bit more candidly about that. So to me, I really loved this film. I found that everything that worked about the first one I thought was working here. There was a few things that I actually thought were a step up here. Like you mentioned that the costumes were not as good for you personally. I actually think that Ruth Carter stepped up the game on this one. I thought M'Baku and the mountain tribe, their furs were so stylish, so cool. I loved the costumes that Shuri and Okoye wore in the in America when they were undercover. I thought that there was so many just gorgeous designs, from the Mayan designs of Telecon to any outfit that Angela Bassett wore in it was just incredible. Personally, I would actually advocate for another Oscar for Ruth Carter in this. I think that this did enough to differentiate itself from the first film, especially because we barely see the Black Panther suit whatsoever in the film, that it felt like it was doing so much with the costumes, and Ruth Carter just killed it with that. I also noticed you say that you weren't as big a fan of the music on this one as you were in the first. Mm-hmm. I loved the music in this. I actually thought that Ludwig Göransson went off on that score right here. It's very different from the first one, but I love sort of the electronic sounds that he added into this one. There's a lot more 808s, whereas the first film relied a lot more on the talking drum sound. This one is a lot more digital, but I thought that it worked for the sound of the film. I also loved the use of acoustic guitars and very Latin-inspired sounds in the score, because it kind of bridged that gap between what the Black Panther score has done in the past, which is adding in these very traditional African sounds and instruments with a lot of modern production. And with this, it added in that kind of Latin influence too, which I thought was very interesting. And Namor's theme I thought was great in the film. I don't know, Ludwig Göransson killed it in my mind. But to me, what I think made this film special was the commentary on colonization in the film. And I actually thought it was very bold how far it went with that commentary, because in a lot of Marvel movies, it just feels like, and it just is, U.S. military propaganda. You know, in films like Captain America, that is very much, no matter how good the film is, it's an imperialist message. You've got a character who represents American excellence, going out into the world and kicking ass, and, you know, a lot of Marvel, a big complaint that I feel a lot of people have about Marvel, which becomes a plot point at one point in the MCU, is that you've got these heroes that can just enter any country, cause a shit ton of damage, and then it's just like, yeah, America. But this one actually kind of falls on the opposite end of that, where it really makes the US government out to be a major villain. And the entire, I mean, you already mentioned that Tenoch Huerta, who plays Namor in this, he's an excellent villain. And the reason he's such an excellent villain is because we get what he's talking about, and he's right. Because his whole point is that he has to strike first, because he knows that colonial governments like the US, like France, like really any European nation or North American nation, they would strip Wakanda for its resources at the first chance. They would strip Telecon for its resources at the first opportunity they got. And it's so interesting to me how this is a theme throughout the film, and it's highly critical of the U.S. Like, even having a moment where Julia Louis-Dreyfus' character says, oh, I dream about what our military would do if we could just get rid of Wakanda and steal all of their vibranium. Like, that to me is so interesting thematically. If you look at this in comparison with like any other Marvel movie, there's so much that it's saying that I think sets it apart from everything else. But this film really did work to me, for me, and I was not let down at all. Was it as good as the first one? No, but I mean, that just comes from the feeling that there were more stories to be told with T'Challa, and everything feels like it was too soon. But obviously that's not the film's fault. That's just an unfortunate part of life, that Chadwick Boseman passed away far too quick, and there are so many more stories that should have been told. But I don't know. I was satisfied with this film overall, and I can't wait to see more Namor in the MCU.
No, I fully agree with everything that you just said about the themes. I thought the themes were very good. I just thought the way they were written into the film and handled were very poor. Like, you mentioned Julia Louis-Dreyfus' character making that comment. That comment's made in a joke fashion. I would have much preferred if that discussion was something they wanted to handle to not make it the butt of a joke, because it happens multiple times where they go into certain imperialistic things that, whether it is the U.S. government or Wakanda themselves may be wanting to do or trying to get involved, it's usually the follow-up statement is a joke, or it's very much quickly forgotten and pushed aside. Like, we'll bring it up, but we won't actually act on it. The times they do act on it, I think, are the ones that really work. As I mentioned before, in the scene in the third act would be when Shuri meets Killmonger in the ancestral plane, where he brings up, hey, this is what could happen. We need someone who's going to be strong, who's going to be powerful. And she's like, that's me. We don't find out in that moment, but later on we see the conclusion of that scene, which I think that scene does a very good job of dealing with those themes. And then the very end of the movie with how it presents itself with its resolutions of both people coming together to work together, and then Namor talking with, I don't remember if it was another just general or her cousin or his cousin or something like that, the other person there at the end, who's like, why did we just surrender? And he's like, well, we need them and they need us, because it's going to happen regardless. We just need to be together, and that's what we got. They gained our respect, we gained their respect. And I felt like those scenes were done very well, but as I mentioned before, a lot of the comments made on those were very much detrimented by jokes, whether it was almost everything with the FBI in this movie was a joke, which really killed the pacing, killed the mood. I feel like there's a lot of good in this movie. There's just also a lot of bad. And while I can really myself appreciate those good parts, like I mentioned, the very opening of this movie, how it deals with Boseman's passing, all the stuff with Nakia throughout the film, the Shuri and Killmonger scene, the big fight at the end, the very end when we find out T'Challa had a son, and who is the Prince of Wakanda. All those scenes that were handled with emotion, handled with care, I thought were very good. Just the rest of the movie was so much lacking in a tone. Most of it comes down to just a script that's very bloated, that could have easily cut 30 minutes to make a more concise movie, and just the conventional MCU norms that happen nowadays, where every movie has to fit the 4-quadrant territory that MCU movies have to do. They have to be funny, they have to be serious, they have to be action-packed, they have to do this. Where like the first Black Panther movie, while it did fit that, the jokes didn't feel as forced. The story kept moving. There wasn't long periods where nothing really happened. And I've seen a lot online. I think this is just another movie I'm just very much disconnected from the rest of the viewing body experience. Because most people online are like, Angela Bassett, Ramonda's Best in Show, supporting actress candidate. They really liked the inclusion of Riri. They really liked this character, that character. And for me, all those characters really did not work for me. They all felt very one note. Outside of Nakia and outside of Namor, everyone in this movie, including Shuri for the most part, just felt very one note. They had one character element, and that's the only character element they were allowed to have. They were never allowed to break any character and show a different emotion. But yeah, enough about Wakanda Forever. I'm just knocked off this thing off the table. Let's dive into our predictions of the week, because this is already a very long episode. And last week I got 2 categories, so this week you start us off. And which one do you want to bring to the table today?
So today I'm going to talk about production design, because this is actually something, after seeing Wakanda Forever and after seeing Pinocchio, which we didn't even get into this week. We'll talk about it probably when you see it. But I swapped some things around. Now, until this week, I've had Black Panther Wakanda Forever in my production design 5, but after seeing it, that's actually one of the elements that I don't think this movie did a lot to reinvent, because we still see Wakanda in this movie, but for the most part, the other design elements in it are like military facilities. They're very bland. There's a lot of water that we see, but it's not like beautifully done underwater areas. So I did take that out of my 5 this week. So I have 2 new inclusions in my production design top 5. So I'm going to start off at the very top this week and work my way down. So at number 1, I've still got Babylon. Babylon, it feels pretty undeniable that this is winning. Hollywood movies, they always win. We see it with Mank. We see it with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. This is the type of big production design that wins this category year after year. At number 2, I've got The Fabelmans. Now, not only is the production designer of this film a former Oscar winner for Avatar, but this is a film that the production design is very tasteful. It uses a lot of it. It kind of shows the family's progression through their life by showing the different spaces that they live in, which kind of reflects the mind state of both Mitzi and I cannot remember the father's name. God, it escapes me. Paul Dano's character. We really get their mind state from the production design. So yes, I 100% think that those two are getting nominated, but Babylon is unquestionably winning this category. Then at number 3, I've got Avatar: The Way of Water. This is a film that I think at first I was a bit apprehensive that maybe the Academy wouldn't go for something because they already gave an Oscar to this before, but seeing more and more of it in the trailers, they really have done so much in the design elements of this, and I think it will be in that top 5. After that, I've got Pinocchio, which is a new entry into my top 5, and after seeing it, I think that this should be very close to maybe possibly even being a winner in this category because of how beautiful the production design is. However, there's no precedent for this. We've never seen an animated film in this category. Will they go for that? I have no idea, because there might be an argument that, should we really reward Pinocchio because they're not creating anything with their bare hands? But at the same time, Avatar: The Way of Water is the same. And if they're awarding the production design in that, which is all CGI, then why not award the production design in something as beautifully handcrafted and lovingly built as Pinocchio? Then at number 5, I've got Elvis. And the reason for Elvis being here is obviously we've got Catherine Martin, I think is her name. We've talked about her before. And she did the costume design, which is getting nominated, and she did the production design, and I think that's getting nominated too. Now, that's at the detriment of my number 6, which is Glass Onion. And I so wish that I could have Glass Onion in here, but alas, I just don't know if it would make it, even though personally it would probably be my winner in the category. At number 7, I've got Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. I talked about it already. I think that what they did that's new in this film feels a little bit more bland. It feels very typical Marvel, which is like military rooms and like a lot of concrete, whereas the first film really showed this entirely new world of Wakanda. We've already seen that at this point. I don't know if that's enough to get it a production design nomination again. And then following that, I'm just going to rattle them off because nothing here is something that I really think could make it in. So at number 8, Bardo. 9, Al Qaeda on the Western Front. 10, Everything Ever All at Once, which some people would argue should be higher, but I don't really believe in it in production design. And then, in no particular order, things that have possibilities that I don't have any confidence in: The Batman, Empire of Light, Matilda, White Noise, and The Woman King. So overall, that's my take on production design. Is there anything in my top 5 to 7 or so that you think should change around?
I mean, we have 6 of the same top 7, just switch Bardo and Black Panther and the order a little bit, and that's the same 7, but we have the same 5. So I don't really have any real comments, just I back pretty much everything you said. I think I have Avatar winning, though, but that's just because I have it in picture.
Oh, no way. It's
First
even
one
if
won.
It wins picture. Even if it wins picture, the first one wasn't up against motherfucking Babylon, dude. Babylon is it's the Great Gatsby meets Mank. It's Great Gatsby and Mank. Put those together, you got the ultimate production design winner. It's going to be massive parties and mansions and Hollywood sets that are 100 feet high, and this isn't a class of its own.
Probably, yeah.
So even if Avatar wins picture, it's not winning this.
Probably. But to be different, that's my one. But to give you some credit, we move over to score, which is my category for the week. And I do have Babylon at number 1. And I'm going to do the same thing, starting at 1 going down, because I already mentioned these before. Women Talking was my number 2. It stays at 2. Fabelmans drops from 1 to 3 because the score is now out on streaming, and this score is very mid and forgettable, and in any other world I would not have it getting nominated, but this is John Williams' last Oscar contender score, so I don't think they're going to let him go unnominated, but I don't think he's winning anymore.
It's gonna get disqualified. I've said it before. It's gonna get disqualified. If you saw that the soundtrack album, half of that soundtrack album is other people's music, and it's all classical music. I don't know. I think it's getting disqualified. But continue. I don't want to interrupt. I'm sorry.
We got Pinocchio at 4, And then 5, I'm tied between 2 movies. It's the Batman and Way of Water. Batman's just out right now, so it has the priority. But Way of Water should probably get its way in here. I just don't really know what to take out at the moment. But if Fableman's is disqualified, easy. Avatar moves up. Banshees also moved up after seeing it. Scores for real. One of my favorite parts about the movie, and I really wasn't a huge fan of the movie. Empire Lights at 8 just because of the people who did it. Reznor and Ross, they're proven winners. But I don't really see this movie getting much. And then we have Maverick and Women King rounding out the 10. Do I think they're getting in? No, but there's a long shot chance for them. Do you have any thoughts about this order besides, obviously, Fableman's not really probably getting in because of a disqualification?
So, but here's the thing. Even if the Fableman's isn't disqualified, I don't think it's getting in. I think it's pretty recognizable that this score is not really anything special. People are going to walk out of the movie saying, was there a score? That's how I felt when I walked out of it. I was like, was there a score? And all of the music moments that I remembered from the movie were not John Williams music. But overall, I've got 3 of your 5. I think you're spot on with, it's going to be either Babylon or Women Talking. I don't know which one I lean towards right now, but I think you're on something there. Pinocchio, definitely happening after seeing it especially. But that said, I moved it down after I saw it. I don't think Pinocchio can win score, which I previously did, because it doesn't really have many memorable themes, whereas Babylon and Women Talking really do. But then, outside of that, I have Banshees in my top 5, so I would boot out the Fablemans for Banshees at number 5, and I would boot out the Batman for Avatar: The Way of Water at number 4. I mean, the music we've heard from the trailer is pretty spectacular. It uses the old themes from the score, but it has that sort of humming sound that just is so, like that da 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 da, is just such a great theme. And I don't know, for you to be so high on Avatar but not have it in your score 5 is quite interesting. And I know you love Batman too, so...
Yeah, the score one's more like I want to take out Fableman's. I don't know which to put in. Pinocchio, Women Talking, Babylon seem like surefire thanks. That leaves me with 1. Batman's a score I've heard. Avatar's one I have not heard yet. But our next category, so we can round out here to hopefully get in just under the 2-hour mark, like where the original Black Panther was, and not be to Wakanda Forever's 2-hour and 40-minute mark. We have your best pictures predictions, which most of your top 10, excluding like 3 movies, it looks like, are all movies you have seen.
Yeah, I mean, at this point in the year, I've really basically seen everything, and as of this weekend, I will have seen Bardo, I will have seen She Said, so I'm really coming up on, like, only really having Babylon and Avatar: The Way of Water left for me. But anyways, I'm going to start from my number 1 and work my way down. So at number 1, I still have Everything Everywhere All at Once, and just because I think I gave this theory so long ago on the show, I have a theory that only films that are from first-time directors can win. It's a statistical anomaly that has basically happened where you see every year there's a movie from a director who's had a previous nomination, which then loses in favor of something that feels fresh, that feels new. Yes, I've heard all of the things that people say, that Everything Everywhere All at Once is not going to appeal to older voters. Yes, I've heard people say The Fablemans is going to do better on a preferential ballot. However, statistically, Everything Everywhere All at Once has a head up, because The Fablemans, especially being the front runner, which it is undeniably the front runner, and it's my number 2 right here. The Fablemans is a film that is going to peak right about now. It's going to flop in theaters. It did horribly, not horribly this weekend. I don't want to say it did horribly this weekend. It got the same per theater average as Tar, but it's the brand new Spielberg movie. It hasn't been marketed well. People don't know what it's about. They don't know that it's a biopic about Spielberg. There's all these things people don't know. This is going to make like $30 million tops at the box office. It is going to flop. It's not going to recoup its budget, and I think there's going to be a narrative around it that it's a bit toxic. Even no matter how much people love the film in the film industry, I don't think this is winning. I think it's going to peak very early. It's going to win some early awards, and then people are going to start talking, do we really love it as much as we thought? Which is where Everything Everywhere All at Once comes in. That's a film with passion. It's a film with a lot of people loving it. But, yes, I will admit it might struggle on a preferential ballot. I'm keeping it at my number 1 until we see some of those televised awards, though. Then, at number 3, Banshees of Inisherin. It's the number 2 in original screenplay. It's winning actor. It's probably winning supporting actress. It's getting tons of nominations. It's number 3. At number 4, Women Talking. It's winning adapted screenplay, hands down. So, it's a top tier contender right there because of that screenplay win. Then at number 5, I've got Babylon. This is one that I just can't wait to hear the reactions. Actually, I think the first screening of Babylon is today.
Tonight, yep.
So we should be hearing reactions and having them on next week's show. So I'm super excited for that one. It is top 5 for me, and I just can't wait for that. Top Gun Maverick is my number 6. This one, I do think that the hype is going to kind of fall a little bit as the season goes, although it might get reignited when it potentially wins the Golden Globe. Number 7, I've got Tar. Now, how I feel about this top 7 is, this top 7 feels pretty, solid. This is a very sturdy top 7. Everything after this, it's a little bit of a, there's some things fighting for this spot. So after 7 at Tar, which this is the safe threshold, we get into the stuff that's all fighting for this last spot. And so I'll just go through those right now as the fighting ones. And that's at number 8, She Said, which I really think is fighting for that number 10 spot. But I have it more likely than the other ones just because it's a film that's going to appeal to voters. It's a film that we know that voters like the sensibility. It's going to appeal a lot to the older voters of the Academy who have voted in stuff like The Post in the past, which had much worse reviews and reactions than this film does. And then at number 9, I've got Avatar: The Way of Water. This one is such a huge spectacle. It's going to be fresh in people's minds. It's going to be a huge hit. And that's why it makes it into the top 10. And then at number 10, I've got Pinocchio. We'll talk more about it in future weeks. This is my second favorite film of the year. It is so special. It feels so just perfectly. It's so emotional. But the thing that makes it different than a lot of animated films is that it's serious. And despite the fact that it is very funny and very wholesome and very charming, there's something more about this film that voters are going to watch it because it's nominated in animation. They're going to watch it because it has Guillermo del Toro's name on it, which is kind of a genius marketing technique because people like Guillermo del Toro. And they're going to take it seriously because with a lot of animated movies, they brush it to the side and they go, yeah, but it's a kid's movie. There's no way you watch Pinocchio and go, yeah, this is just a kid's movie. It's dark. It's a little bit sad. Not a little bit sad. I was sobbing at the end. Goddamn snotty tears on this movie. And the thing that it's talking about political issues, and it talks about them and talks about death in a way that is very serious and elevates it beyond a kid's movie. It is in the top 10 right now. I'm going to hold strong to that, although there's a lot of hurdles in its way. But it could make it up stronger if it really gets those precursors. Then after that, at 11, I've got Elvis. At number 12, I've got Glass Onion, which just depends on how the Academy will respond to it. Number 13, I've got The Whale, which really depends on overperforming in screenplay and actor. And then at number 14, I've got Bardo. Those are the ones that I think are fighting for that spot right there, those 8 to 10 spots. And each of them kind of has different reasons why they would happen. And then after that, I've got the films that are on the periphery, films that I don't really think have a huge chance, but they can't be counted out until we start seeing the precursors, because these will probably show up some places, and if they don't, they're done. And that is at number 15, Decision to Leave. 16, Emancipation. 17, The Woman King, which should be higher, but it's going to be hit by the controversy. It will affect it. It will. Number 18, Triangle of Sadness. 19, All Quiet on the Western Front, which should be higher, but Netflix doesn't care. Number 20, Empire of Light. 21, Living. 22, I Want to Dance with Somebody. 23, Till. 24, The Sun. 25, 13 Lives. And 26, After Sun. And that brings us all the way to the very end. That's my entire Best Picture list. But again, I really think that the top 14 are the ones with the real shots right now.
Definitely. I mean, of your top 14, all of the 10 I have in Best Picture are there, so that checks out with me. Obviously, I'm a little bit higher on Elvis than you are. I think Bardo and Pinocchio are right now fighting for my 10. I just want to see which one Netflix gives them more push to, because right now, going back to those screenings that I was talking about earlier where Glass Onion wasn't getting many, Bardo's getting a lot. And so is Pinocchio.
Really? I
and
thought
so
Bardo
is,
only had 4 screenings at the moment.
Maybe I read it wrong. I thought I saw that Bardo Pinocchio and Good Nurse were getting the majority of them, while White Noise wasn't getting many, and Glass Onion wasn't getting many, and Blonde wasn't getting many, obviously. So, yeah, but overall, I like the lineup, and I really like the Emancipation shout out down at 16. Bold takes there.
Oh, no, Emancipation is getting great notices. And here's the thing. The reason why it's so high is because Clayton Davis is one of the only people who's seen the film, and he has it in his top 10. And he has it across the board, which is definitely a little bit very, very bold. And Clayton might not be the most, accurate predictor at this time of year. But we haven't seen it, and someone who has seen it is saying it's the real deal. So I don't know. It's up there for me. It's one of the ones that's unseen. So I'm like, yeah, this has a better shot right now than All Quiet, because we don't know for sure yet. Will Definitely. It in the end have a better shot? I don't know. I can't wait for you to see Pinocchio though, because it's that's one that I think once you see it, you're gonna be like, yeah, this is happening. This is happening. Like when I finished it, I'm like, yeah, maybe I'm biased because I love the film so much, but it's so special. But it's special in a way where I don't see how voters would brush it off like they typically do with animated films. Mm-hmm. It's so real, and it's gonna have a wide enough draw. And like you said, Netflix has given it like 26 private screenings for Academy members. They want this to happen, and they know that it can happen, which is what I was hoping for all year long, and it seems to be coming true. So fingers crossed that it's going to be happening.
Well, I don't think I'll be able to see Pinocchio this week because I don't think it's going to be opening up yet, but I will be able to see Decision to Leave, so I can match you there, and you'll be able to see She Said to match me there, so that will be an interesting discussion for next week's episode. Maybe Bardo pops up, maybe the menu. I guess you have to tune in and see.
Yeah, is Bardo hitting your Regal this week?
I will find out tomorrow, because tomorrow's when they post showtimes.
I guess you will. Because I know it's hitting some people's Regals, especially in our Discord. A lot of people have said that they're getting it at their Regal this week. So let's hope, fingers crossed, it hits your Regal, because I know I'm going to be seeing it next Saturday afternoon. So hitting the TIFF Bell Lightbox for that, and I'm very excited. But until then, my name is Matt.
And my name is Dyl, and this is Fantasy Filmball.
Thank you for tuning to this episode of Fantasy Filmball with Matt and Dyl. Keep up to date with us on Twitter at @FFilmball. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you prefer to listen to podcasts. We even upload a video format of the podcast to YouTube if you want to see our faces. Thank you for listening to this episode of the show, and come back next week.